Good afternoon everyone, and here we are with some builds from the archives and some ones which just needed finishing off. Now I've had quite a number of these aircraft in the collection for a long time, but I hadn't put them together as one cohesive unit. And let's have a look at Vietnam, mainly the WHIF Malagasy involvement later in the war. So this is from 1970 onwards, when the war was being Vietnamized and Malagasified by the Americans, who were desperate to get out. The Malagasys always operated a slightly different model to the Americans. They didn't like assault helicopter tactics and putting the helicopters at risk. One, because they didn't have as many, and two, because they deemed it ineffective in terms of lives and airframes lost. Now, notwithstanding, they did fight a lot of battles and they did take considerable losses. Figures run to about 20,000 overall WHIF killed. And they did hold outposts. They did work with the Australians and they worked with the New Zealand, the so-called Anzac forces. And their doctrine was primarily the use of medium and heavy helicopters, supported by the light helicopters operating as gunships, scouts, taking in small units for infiltration and such like, and supported certainly from 1970 onwards by gunships like the Huey Cobra. So let's have a look at the 34th Aviation Battalion, as it was, which was deployed to the Central Highlands of Vietnam around circa 1971. And they stayed in the theatre with rotation to about 1975, when a referendum was held and the South decided to join the North under a communist flag, and there was a peaceful transition for the next 4 years to 1979, division of territory, etc, etc. So let's have a look at the CO's bird, or 34 Sunray as it was called, which is a Hobby Boss UH-1C or UH-1M, as it was modernised later on. Now, Nibbles, as it was called, gave way to Nibbles 2 because Nibbles 1 was shot down. And these were used with 4 M60s on the pylons, 2 rocket pods, and the CO's bird basically, and the 2IC's bird, would fly over the assaulting helicopters, providing command and control, stay on station, and provide direction for any assaults that were going in. So a very exposed bird, very brave pilots and crew. And here is Nibbles. Now the Hobby Boss kit is absolutely excellent for a small cabined Huey, the AB204 derivative. Then escorting the whole lot would have been, from certainly 1970 onwards, would be Huey Cobras. And this one, as someone's asked, it does have rocket pods here, different type of rocket pod on the outer pylons to the inboards. And because you got so many aircraft in the 34th, the aircraft, where there weren't so many numbers, could be numbered individually like N or T, Tango. But where you got a lot more aircraft or specific roles, you then started to subdivide. So the Huey Cobras, and this one sports a late suppressive shroud over the exhaust, were called Zulus, and then you'd have Zulu Alpha, Zulu Bravo, that'd be one pair, Zulu Charlie, Zulu Delta, another pair, Echo Foxtrot, so on. So you could have up to 26 Cobras as part of the 34th Aviation Battalion. I think this is the KP kit. It's a good little kit, in some ways more accurate around the exhaust, so the intakes, than the special hobby. Bit difficult to build around the canopy, which has to be joined, but it's a nice little aircraft. 7.62 and a 40mm grenade launcher under there in the turret. And yeah, these finished. This one is finished in overall olive drab by Valio. Some of the others are finished in forest green or khaki, various schemes. It didn't really matter. It was whatever paint was lying around most of the time. Then we move on to the slicks. So the slicks were not so prominent as the American ones, but if you wanted to insert, say, a Pathfinder, unit or a small unit, you would probably use the Slicks, and they were very much a light support helicopter. And this is the Hasegawa UH-1D, which is the reboxed kit by Revell. It's basically the same kit. Now, the big flaw with this model is the canopy divider there is just way over scale. There's nothing really I can do to separate that because the glass fits on separately. And it's a real shame because that's the biggest thing that lets this somewhat dated kit down. Otherwise, it's absolutely fantastic. A nice, easy build. The doors do move a little bit over scale. I've glued them shut, and I've modified the door gun positions there that were from AliExpress to hold the GMPG, because the Madagascans used the GMPG. They did use the M60 in some applications, but mainly the GMPG chambered for a 7.62 NATO. So this is Norman. Norman is a Slick, and Norman would go into battle normally escorted by a gunship, either a UH-1C/M, or here we have Big Cheese Tax or Tango, which is a same Hasegawa kit with the defects. The Revell reboxing has the same defects there with that ultra wide pillar. Otherwise, like I said, a great kit, and I've modified it again with some AliExpress spares and the ammunition rack there from the Hobby Boss kit. This is Big Cheese Tax. The naming of helicopters in Vietnam was slightly inappropriate, but Big Cheese Tax isn't too bad. So there we go, Big Cheese Tax. And then moving on to the bread and butter of the Malagasy assault formations, that was the medium helicopters. And the medium helicopters, again, they were prefix, so 34th Aviation Battalion, M for Mike, and then this is aircraft E. So its code name would be 34 Mike Echo, and its stable mates would be 34 Mike Delta, 34 Mike Alpha, etc., etc., up to 26 could be included. And like I said, the Malagasys used the medium helicopters a lot more, and this one has two Butler's printed models, 50 cals, and it is, of course, the venerable Airfix kit. So it's got the right exhaust for an early Frog, and the Airfix kit is very basic. It's got some patches there, and I've put the armour panels around the exhaust. Now, the Malagasys were a bit odd in that they used the Wessex for the Marines and they used the Frog for the Army. Why did they do that? Well, they just did. The Airfix kit is a very basic kit. It's been hit by the riveter who Airfix employed. I've added a few extra bits just to try and up-detail it, but it is basically a very basic kit. This one has the Hobby Boss rotors, because I had a spare set of Hobby Boss rotors, and they are a big improvement over the Airfix ones. But again, for an early bird, that's not too terrible. It does have the APU tail, as opposed to the Fujimi KV-107 boxings. Why did they use tandems? Well, they really like tandem helicopters, going from the banana helicopter days. And they supported the whole lot with Chinooks, quite a large number of Chinooks. And Chinooks would have the prefix Hotel for heavy, Mike for medium, Hotel for heavy, and this is Hotel Bravo. So at least 9 of these would be included in the 34th Aviation Battalion, which gave organic capability to move 105mm artillery pieces, light anti-tank weapons, bunker busting weapons, take in large numbers of troops. So you may have a landing zone that would be secured by pathfinders going in first, then by an initial assault with the mediums, and then you're bringing in whole platoons at a time using the Chinooks, and then coming back for the artillery to then build up your fire bases. So the Chinook, and this is a die cast which I've repainted just using Tamiya khaki drab, but the Chinook is really the backbone of making this whole concept work. And of course Vietnam was pioneering in many ways, because it was the evolution and development of the dust-off from its early concepts in Korea. And this is Proctor. Proctor is from the 56 combined wing, which was a Casevac, dust off and medical wing, a combined wing with everything you needed to offer an aviation battalion, a infantry brigade, dust off capabilities, and very busy they were. Priorities were to remove your friendly wounded first, that's both Malagasy and Army of the Republic of Vietnam wounded, then civilians, and then finally Viet Cong or MVA wounded last. These served for a number of years afterwards, eventually being retired from reserve service in around 1986. So a very long serving aircraft. Now this one is painted in camouflage, the standard Malagasy overall, UK light stone and forest green camouflage, and the rest of them, some are in forest green, some are in khaki, but the camouflage was used. It was used by the Malagasys in various conflicts, because of course you wouldn't just be in Vietnam, you might be deploying to support operations globally. And I do need to just tint those top windows there, which I used the Valio transparent green for. And from 1972 onwards, there was a rotation and the first use of the Puma, the AS 330. Again, mainly in an aeromedical role. It wasn't deemed robust enough to go into the assault transport role. They preferred the Frogs for that. And this one is fitted just to accept walk-in patients here. This is the old Airfix kit, which is thankfully being re-released this year. I brought this ready-made and repainted it. Take care. Goodbye.